Welcome back, everyone, to the Beyond Money Summit. So glad that you're joining us for this next session. So I really hope that over the break, you had a chance to visit the marketplace and see some of the women-owned brands that are doing things and bringing things to the market that are really enriching our economy. Because for our next conversation, we're going to be talking about being capital women and the state of women's entrepreneurship here in Canada. And for this discussion, I am joined by the founder and CEO of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, Nancy Wilson. Let me give you a little bit on her background. Nancy launched the Chamber in January 2018. The Chamber is a national not-for-profit organization that advocates for the economic priorities of women-owned businesses. It is the first and only Chamber of Commerce in Canada that represents the unique and diverse voices of women-identified entrepreneurs and business owners. Nancy is also a chartered professional accountant, just like me, CPA, with over a decade of accounting experience and various corporate roles. Prior to joining and starting the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, she ran an accounting and business advisory firm specializing in women business owners and entrepreneurs. Welcome, Nancy. I am so glad to have you here. You are such an accomplished feminist entrepreneur, and you are very collaborative, linking with stakeholders in your mission and what you do. So I understand so welcome.
Thanks, Leanne. I'm so happy to be here.
Amazing. I know one of the things that your chamber addresses specifically is challenges for women entrepreneurs and business owners across Canada. And you guys have identified a lot of things, but two key challenges have been systemic barriers to success, as well as a lack of community connection. Really big problems. I'm wondering in how you decided to found the chamber. Why did you decide it to be a chamber? And what exactly is a chamber of commerce versus other types of ways you can organize businesses such as yours?
Right. So you're right that I very specifically chose to create a chamber of commerce as opposed to another type of not-for-profit organization. And the reason why I did that was when I heard in 2017 that Canada didn't have a women's chamber of commerce, that was very concerning to me. And so why is that a problem? It's a problem because chambers of commerce, what they do is they're essentially associations or groups of membership groups that operate to advocate to the government on behalf of their members. Chambers of commerce, their members are business owners. So it may be based on geography, or it's largely based on geography. But the fact that we didn't have a women's chamber of commerce meant that, we didn't have that advocacy agent operating at the policy level, speaking on behalf of women business owners. And, uh, you know, chambers of commerce, or the Chamber of Commerce, has been around a long time. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce has been around since 1929. And when you have groups like that, that are run by very powerful people, or powerful people running large businesses, and you have them in sort of society operating in this way, influencing government for long periods of time through history, they tend to become political, economic, social institutions. And that's what's happened with the Chamber of Commerce, or even just the brand Chamber of Commerce. So I knew that I wanted to bank on that brand. And instead of the Chamber of Commerce brand bringing with it credibility and influence to the powerful, I wanted to use that credibility and legitimacy on behalf of a less powerful group. And that's exactly what happened. So within 6 months of launching the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, we didn't have that many members, but I was getting invitations from Ottawa asking me to come speak to folks in the Prime Minister's office, in the Ministry of Small Business, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really worked for us.
Amazing. Can you tell me a little bit more about like why a women's chamber of commerce? What are some of the reasons why you couldn't just join, let's say, the Alberta Chamber of Commerce or the Ontario Chamber of Commerce? Why do we need a women specific chamber of commerce?
Right. So, I mean, I did some research before I started the Women's Chamber of Commerce. And I mean, an obvious question is, well, are the existing chambers of commerce representing the women business owners? Are they, taking on those issues and representing them? So I downloaded the policy books for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, which are the biggest chambers of commerce in Canada, just because Ontario has a very large population. And I was reading through the different policies that had been put forward over the last, 3 to 5 years by these large chambers. And I wasn't really seeing too much about some of the issues that I know women business owners are really struggling with. So I kind of, I was getting tired reading through these things. So I just did, Command F to like a word search in the PDF. And I searched for the word women. And in one of the books, I got 0 hits. In one of the other books, I got 1 hit. And it was about women in skilled trades. So, I mean, I think that the chambers of commerce are advocating well for their members, but the fact is, women-owned businesses are less likely to be a part of their membership because of the cost of membership and the size of business and the type of business that these chambers are really going after. So no
Mm-hmm,
one
mm-hmm.
no one is really speaking to government on the issues that are really plaguing women entrepreneurs.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what those issues are? I mean, you pointed out the sheer fact that we're not going to have the numbers in a larger chamber. We're not going to. There, women, for example, are the majority owners of small and medium-sized enterprises. They usually have one or maybe one or more employees, and we account for almost 40% of self-employed Canadians. So
Yeah.
what are the challenges? What are the things that the chamber is advocating for women entrepreneurs, women business owners?
Right. So from the very beginning in 2018, we were advocating for childcare and affordable accessible childcare. And, we will continue to fight for that as we see what unfolds over the next couple of years, um, with the proposed childcare plan. There can be no real equity in terms of women starting and growing and scaling their businesses until we tackle the childcare issue. Um, and even if a business owner like myself doesn't have children, my suppliers may have children. So it affects everybody. Um, Access to capital is absolutely probably the biggest issue, maybe secondary to childcare. Although personally, I think I'd probably put it as the biggest issue. And there's no doubt that there are gender um, and racial inequalities at the systemic level when we talk about access to capital. And the fact is, you cannot build a business without access to capital, period. And, there are various systemic inequalities that are built into the system that are so baked into the system that we just accept them day to day. And the system itself really needs to be re-examined for the current face of our economy, because a lot of it was built for an economy and a workforce that look very, very different than what we see today.
Yeah, it was really built for, what's that acronym, white, able bodied men of a
Yep,
higher income and higher class, right? So it wasn't really built for
absolutely.
everybody. Can we
Yeah.
unpack some of these systemic issues? I'm wondering about some statistic that I read that, women get loans at the same rate as men. So what are we talking about? Like, what's the issue here? There can't be a capital issue if a stat came out saying women receive capital loans from the bank at the same rates as men.
Yeah. So a Scotiabank study came out looking very specifically at, gender specific differences in whether loans were granted to um, male and female applicants. And
Small
they
business
actually,
owners who need capital to start their businesses. Yeah.
exactly. So applying for small business loans, um, and the Scotiabank study actually found that women were more likely to be awarded a loan than the men were. So,
Interesting. That's
but they did find that women were less likely to apply for a loan. So, and the difference in the percentage of women that received the loan that they applied for versus the men was pretty wide. It was, it wasn't 1%. It was over 5%. That's a big difference. And it was, personally, I think it was a little bit glossed over. It was sort of said like, well, what's the problem? And for me, I think, well, that's a big problem. I mean, I'm not feminism or feminists and people who are looking at gender equality. We're not looking for women to supersede men. We're really looking for equality and equity. And I would look at that statistic and say, why is that? Why would more women get a loan than men? Just as I would question the stat if it was the opposite. Why are more men getting loans than women? And what I suspect really is there's a lot of qualitative factors going on um, before the loan is actually put into the system. Um, Women, particularly BIPOC women, are are being discouraged from actually submitting a loan uh, unless that business and that loan is extremely well qualified for being accepted and approved. and women business owners, I think just women in general kind of understand that as common sense. You get a vibe, you get the kind of discouraging comments, and you go in to submit a loan and you walk out without having submitted that loan feeling very discouraged.
So, like, that data basically isn't capturing the woman who goes into the bank and with the full intent of applying for a loan, but walks out with the discouragement, your credit line, what collateral do you have? Is your partner signing on this with you? That they don't even submit. So it actually doesn't even come up in terms of the data, you know? And
Exactly.
it definitely a lot of studies as well in the Black communities. They've been doing that as well, just being discouraged from even applying from the get go. And
Yeah.
obviously, with women's wealth, there being a women's wealth gap, you might not have the collateral, you might not have the credit, the four C's in order to make sure that you can really get that loan to start your business.
Yeah.
So that's very, very interesting.
I
Going
mean,
back to the ad.
I'm speculating. So just to be clear, I'm speculating. I don't have
Mhm.
any evidence to that effect, but based on what I know from talking to many business owners, I suspect there are qualitative um, uh, like qualitative issues that influence that effect. I'm just
Yeah.
being clear on that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I mean, that's your role, definitely to be quite clear about that stuff. So, I'm going to be all anecdotal all over this, but,
Yeah,
it's resonating with some truth.
it's a chat.
Going back to, yeah, yeah. Going back to some of the other advocacy issues, we talked about capital, you talked about childcare. And childcare not only impacts the woman business owner, the woman entrepreneur, but it also impacts the woman as professional, as employee as well too. Can you talk a little bit about what other policies that we think are maybe more for a woman professional, but that could also help the woman entrepreneur in our overall economy?
Yeah. So a big issue is pay equity or wage equity. Um, I think I like to say pay equity. It all
Can you
means the
break?
same thing.
Yeah, okay.
So,
How do you define it? How do you define it?
I mean, essentially, uh, people who are working the same job at the same level are paid the same wage. Um, that's regardless of any other demographic factor. I mean, it's this job pays X, and everybody who does this job gets paid X. Um, and you know, I was really wasn't blown away, but I found that it was interesting when we started the chamber. We did a survey of our members after the first year to determine what issues we would include in our initial advocacy agenda. And one of the issues that came to the front by survey was pay equity. So you could say that, why would these women business owners care about pay equity? They're not employees anymore. If like they're going to be, or they are employers, um, so they're not really in a position, you would think, just on paper, to really care a lot about pay equity. But it makes sense because the idea of pay equity, if we can't achieve in the traditional workforce, the idea and in practice, the fact that a woman would be paid and valued at the same rate as a man, then how can we ever expect um, women business owners to be treated equally and to have the same opportunities that their male counterparts have? Equality is not, we can't segment equality and say, okay, this group of people, you're equal. The rest of them, maybe next year. It doesn't work that way.
It definitely
And
doesn't
the
work that.
same can be said for any underrepresented group. Racial equality, moving towards racial equality or indigenous reconciliation brings everybody forward and influences equality and equity as a whole. So we're all working towards the same thing. It's all human rights.
Hmm. I think all the issues are they all relate to each other. If
Yeah.
you are working a job where you are not paid equally, you don't have that equality, how are you going to put away for if you want that professional career for retirement and all that good stuff? But a lot of funding for businesses comes from bootstrapping, it comes from
Yeah.
personal capital. So if you are have a lot less to work with, it definitely means that a lot less women are going to be able to start businesses as their form of creating legacy and intergenerational. I always say generational wealth,
Yeah.
generational wealth,
No, for
so I do,
sure.
that's really important.
Yeah. I wrote a blog article, can't remember when, I don't know, last year before, talking about how privilege was so baked into the VC kind of model of building a business, and this idea of the friends and family round being coming out of such a privileged mindset that a lot of people can't go and do a friends and family round. They don't have friends and family that have disposable income to invest in a startup. That's just not realistic, you know?
Hmm. 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 So important. It's so important to like highlight and surface these issues and start to really change them. I know another of the critical work you guys do is around access to government contracts and government supply chain. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what the chamber is doing around that?
Yeah. So the government um, supply chain is always it's always very slow moving, um, but the government has sort of made commitments um, to have at least a portion of their supply chain be, quote, diverse suppliers. Um, so, a sliver of the pie is meant to go to diverse suppliers, which includes women and other um, diverse suppliers, I suppose. But the real issue there is access, of course, making access um, simple enough that smaller um, companies can actually get through their sort of procurement system, because it's very complicated, and also that they can um, they have this whole certification system. So like when I go and want to say, like, I want to bid on that contract, and how, the question is, so like, how do I prove that my business is women owned? Personally, I think I should be able to check a box saying I personally attest to the fact that my business is women owned. If you find out after the fact that I'm lying, then there will be various legal consequences, just like any other contract I would enter into as a business person. But for some reason, that isn't the case. There's all these certification models out there, which really cost a lot of money and push that financial burden onto already cash strapped um, diverse suppliers. So
Yeah.
it's a real problem.
Hmm. Oh wow, yeah. I know. There was a woman's entrepreneurship loans that went out, I think it
Mhm.
was last year, as a part of the pandemic, and addressing some of these systemic barriers that women and non-binary folks encounter. And the truth be told is, with a little bit of digging, some of the awardees didn't really seem to have any women. They weren't women led, or, you know, women predominantly led businesses, and yeah, so I could
Yeah,
definitely see that there's some areas where they're lax, and some areas the barriers are also keeping people out, right? Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So I really love that you have a national focus, and your focus is really to address all women. So can you tell me a little bit about how you're embedding inclusive, intersectional feminist practices in the work that you are doing at the chamber?
So we're definitely a feminist organization, like that. Our philosophy and our underlying values are unapologetically feminist. Um, and so we are very much about examining and challenging power structures. Um, Fundamentally, the when I look prior to starting the chamber, when I looked around at sort of the women's business landscape, I was distressed by how many of the programs and organizations out there, not all of them, but a lot of them, were seemed to be focused on sort of changing the individual to match or to function better in the system. And our our sort of thesis, or our basic principle is, um, our members are whole, competent, fully capable human beings who have know exactly what they're doing and can absolutely build and grow a successful business. What needs to change in order for that to happen is systemic barriers. So our focus is on helping women um, build successful businesses within a broken system, and at the same time elevate their voices to change that broken system, so that come the future, our members will be able to need less and less support within that system to achieve their goals.
Mhm, mhm. So yeah, I think that's very impactful, because some people would say, and I often hear, definitely in like communities and circles, that the system really isn't broken. It's actually operating the way it was intended to operate. So sometimes it's like, do you work
Sure.
within it? Do you work with outside of it? Do you do both? I'm a yes and person. So, yes, you can work in it,
Yeah,
and you can start something else. I'm curious just to touch
exactly.
on Yeah, I'm just curious to
Sorry.
touch on this inclusion as well,
Oh, yeah.
when it comes to racial lenses or
Mhm.
immigrant women, all Canadian women. What is the chamber doing around that?
So right now, we've worked in the past with various through partnerships with various organizations. So, and we continue to do that. So, for example, um, when the pandemic hit, we wanted to do an intersectional survey of the impacts of COVID. We knew that, we had our membership group, but we wanted it to really look at, people in different communities that we didn't necessarily have access to, or really had a lot of reach into that network. So we partnered with other organizations so that they could introduce the survey within that group, and we could sort of build our network out into that group. through the partnership with that organization. So our policy is sort of, not to just go and introduce ourselves to the community, but to respect the leadership within that community and build a partnership with them to kind of get a warm introduction. Um, you know, that's sort of our policy. I mean, our organization is a membership organization. Without members, we don't exist. So we accept all women identified and non-binary entrepreneurs and business owners as members, and we welcome anybody that supports our um, supports our mission to join our community.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, that sounds collaborative to me. Definitely a great principle, a great feminist principle. I just want to thank you for spending this time. And, before I say goodbye to you, how can people reach out to you? How can people join the chamber? Because I know they're going to be wanting to do this right after we speak here.
So if you go to the website, canwcc.ca, canwcc.ca, and sign up for our newsletter. That's the best way to do it. We're like, new things are coming in January.
Amazing, amazing. So exciting. Thank you, Nancy, founder and CEO of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, to talk to us a little bit about the state of women's entrepreneurship in Canada. I am so excited that we are continuing this conversation on building wealth and investing in our legacy as women. So don't go anywhere. Keep your comments coming in the chat. Keep the spirit alive. And again, check out the marketplace to see some women-led and women-owned brands.